this is Sloane Square, and that's King's Road. And it's called King's Road because in the old days, when the palace was at Westminster, this is the road that led up to Hampton Court. And you actually needed a King's Pass to travel from Palace of Westminster up to Hampton Court. A lot of the people around here are called Sloanes. Well, they were in my day. I think these days they just call them Rich. Yeah. And that Royal Court Theatre over there, in one of the early Columbo episodes, Columbo goes into there and he solves a murder or something.
It looked really kind of dirty and grimy back then. We're talking about like the early 70s.
It's quite sad of me, but I really like the fact that Columbo has walked down that alleyway. Right, and also it's quite appropriate that I'm wearing this bowler hat because this, which is now McDonald's, used to be the Chelsea Drugstore from the famous Rolling Stones song. You know the song? I went down to Chelsea Drugstore to get my fair share of abuse. Can't always get what you want.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, can't always get what you want. That's the Chelsea. That used to be the Chelsea Drugstore from that song. And they also shot some of the Clockwork Orange in there.
Oh really?
Yes. But then along from McDonald's is Wellington Square, just off King's Road. And in the James Bond books by Ian Fleming, he describes James Bond as living in a small, plain tree-lined street off King's Road, which is possibly this one, or it could be Royal Avenue over there. But I reckon this is a kind of Bond-type square.
Very humble place.
Oh, yeah,
humble dwelling.
A lot of other very famous people lived around this area. Down in Tite Street is where Oscar Wilde lived. So here at number 430 King's Road is the famous shop that used to be called Let It Rock. It was opened by Vivienne Westwood and Malcolm McClaren back in the 1970s, and that's exactly where they launched the Sex Pistols from in 1975.
This used to be called Sex or Seditionaries. Now it's World's End. It's the most famous shop on King's Road. It's number 430, and it's owned by Vivienne Westwood. Adam Ant, everyone comes here. Blondie still comes here. Cass from Skunk and Hazy. But yeah, so hello. So yeah, very famous shop with very famous visitors. So that's the mountain hat from the 80s.
Nice.
But that looks like a kind of Boy George hat.
That's the same era.
Yeah.
It's still handmade in London.
Nice.
It's a little Alice in Wonderland store, very tiny, but very powerful and really influential in the history of London fashion. Also with Galliano and McQueen, Vivienne is a clear influence on them as well. So yeah, visit us.
I really do feel like Gulliver in here. That is massive. The size of that.
That would suit you.
Yeah, nice.
It is a men's shirt. This is Sex Pistols wore this as well.
Yeah, it does seem familiar. Thank you. Oh, see ya. And after you walk down Royal Avenue, just around the corner here is Tite Street. Someone's obviously tried to turn it into Tit Street. How hilarious. And oh yes, now as I expected, there is a blue plaque on the wall because this is where Oscar Wilde used to live. There used to be a street famous for artists, which is possibly where he got the idea for the picture of Dorian Gray, because there were always people coming and going with big frames of paintings and easels and what have you. And then Oscar Wilde lived here until around 1895, which is when he was arrested for posing as a sodomite, inverted commas. Yeah, it was quite sad actually, because apparently I think it was here that Oscar Wilde's wife fell down the stairs and broke her back, and then she later died. And not a lot of people know or think about the fact that Oscar Wilde was actually married, but we've been to his wife's cemetery
in Geneva.
Yeah, Staglieno Cemetery. Another video available on Joolz Guide's YouTube channel. There's one particular bloke called James Whistler, who was a famous artist who lived in this street. So was always having all these run-ins with Oscar Wilde, apparently. And it was he who said to Oscar Wilde, when they were both at a party, famously once, they overheard some man make a very witty remark. And Oscar Wilde said to Mr. Whistler, "Oh, I wish I had said that." And James Whistler said, "You will, Oscar, you will." Do you have a favourite Oscar Wilde aphorism, Simon? Yeah, well, so here, for example, at number 152 King's Road is the Pheasantry, called the Pheasantry because they actually used to have a pheasant shop here many, many years ago. And if you wanted a nice plump bird, this is where to come. Actually, I have to confess my ignorance. I don't know what a pheasant looks like, but that ain't one of them. They're a bit smaller than that, I think.
This is King Charles's old hunting lodge, hence the road being called King's Road.
So the picture up there is of King Charles, is it?
It is indeed.
Which King Charles?
King Charles II.
Thought so, yeah, because it's changed quite a lot. The building's changed over the years. I mean, so it's got this rather peculiar Greek feel to it, and more modern Pizza Express architecture. In 1915, a lady by the name of Eleanor Thornton drowned, and she was a model, and she used to hang out here because it used to be like studios and stuff. She is the model on which they based the Spirit of Ecstasy on the front of the Rolls Royce.
Well, there's a connection there with me because, well, I had to resculpt the Spirit of Ecstasy for the new Rolls Royce for BMW. Yes, because she stood up in the car and she was wearing some fancy dress and it was billowing in the wind, and that's where the guy got the idea to sculpt the icon.
Oh, nice. In the 1960s, it then became like studio flats upstairs and a pretty trendy nightclub downstairs. And this is where Eric Clapton had to escape out of a bedroom window when there was a drugs raid by the police. And it's now a Pizza Express.
No, it's a pizza joint. We'll be in this. Someone, not us, 100 years' time.
A guy in a bowler hat will be here going,
Man, you remember once this used to be a Pizza Express?
No, you're joking!
Yeah, no
That's
way.
amazing!
and some bloke called King Charles used to hang out here.
And that's why they never knocked it down, because of that fact.
Yeah, exactly.